Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Gateway Spotlight, is a show designed to highlight diverse perspectives, next-generation initiatives, emerging trends, and innovative thinkers in the international higher education community. I'm your host, Brooke Roberts. I'm the founder of Inside Study Abroad and the director of partner marketing at Podium Education. And today we are talking about a very hot topic in the world, in any world, in any industry right now, and that is AI. So AI is transforming the way we learn and the way we teach. It's transforming the way we do just about everything. And its potential to impact international education is very significant. So in this conversation, we're talking with two guys who have been I guess at the leading edge of the AI world in their work and how they've used it to run their organizations and deploy it in the work that they do, but also are just kind of nerdy about it and know a lot about AI in general. So we're going to have a great conversation today where we explore the various ways in which AI can be used to enhance international education operations, improve our academic outcomes, promote student learning and engagement. And we're also going to examine some of the potential challenges, concerns that AI is bringing up in the world of education, the world of travel, any ethical and privacy issues that we might want to discuss. And so we're going to kind of try to unpack as much as we can in the next half hour-ish. And so thank you both for being here. I'm going to introduce both of our guests in just a second, but I want to say hello to everybody who's tuning in. If you are here watching us live, please go ahead and tell us in the chat where you are tuning in from. We'd love to know. And throughout this conversation, please share with us how you are leveraging AI in the work that you do, or even in your personal life, the ways that you've been utilizing AI. Before I introduce our guests today, I want to thank today's sponsor, Podium Education, for sponsoring this episode and supporting my work with Gateway. If you're not familiar with Podium, we are a leading digital experiential education company that is changing the face of global education. Our flagship program, the Global Tech Experience, is a fully digital global experiential program that enables students from every background to gain real-world global competencies and work experience while working along peers from around the world. Students from all backgrounds, regardless of their major, they explore in-demand skills of digital marketing, coding, and data analytics through real-world projects with top companies like SpaceX, Charity Water, the Grammys, and more. If you want to learn more about what we do over at Podium, just go to podiumeducation.com and we'd love to tell you more about it. So moving on to today's guest, I have Jose Rosario. He's an account executive at Coursera, and he's a seasoned international education professional with a natural aptitude for leveraging AI for international education. Jesus has supported universities around the world with strategic business development and design solutions for supporting partnership development, student learning, and internationalization. Currently, he's a strategic partnerships executive at Coursera, where his work incorporates strategic business development and designing solutions to support universities with online learning. And of course, we have Dr. Eric Mackintosh, head of academic operations at Podium Education. Eric is an ex-US Peace Corps volunteer and university instructor, and he holds an MA and Ph.D. from Tulane University. I did not know that about you, Eric. I'm learning something new every day. He fervently supports tertiary education, ICT, and product development. And at Podium, he's the head of academic operations. He works with teams across our organization to provide a global tech-driven curriculum to students from all cultural and academic backgrounds. By focusing on applicable hard skills, Podium aims to enhance employability and career growth for its diverse student population. Welcome, Eric and Jesus, to this conversation.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
Hi, everybody. So hello, everyone in the chat. We've got Megan from Pittsburgh, Alexis from Kansas City. What? I'm in Kansas City, Alexis. Nikhil from Houston, Jeff at Ohio Northern, and a bunch of more people. Thank you all so much for being here for this conversation. So I have to always give a preface. I feel like I'm doing this a lot in our episodes recently. Preface this conversation with, we in this room have a lot of knowledge, and our guests here have a lot of knowledge and experience with AI, but by no means are we like the foremost experts on all things AI and every angle and vertical that you could apply it. So give us a little grace. We're just going to share some of our use cases, experiences, our own background and research that we've done to learn more about AI and leverage it in our work. And so we really want to hear from you as well through in the chat. So if you've been using AI, if you've been reading up on it yourself and have a lot of opinions or experience with it, please share in the chat and please pose some questions. And we will leave some time for a Q&A at the end. So with all of that being said, let's start with the basic question I think we all need to have under our belts, and the answer we need to have under our belts as we move forward. I'm going to pose this to you, Eric. What is generative artificial intelligence?
So thanks, Brooke, for that lengthy introduction. I appreciate it. So generative AI focuses on creating new content or data, basically by mimicking what it accesses through its data set, so through existing data. So what's so special about it, I think, is that it is capable of generating original output. So like, think in the case of ChatGPT, text, DALL-E images, video. So it really accesses existing data, learns, and can actually output something that is different every time. I mean, if you prompted GPT using the same prompt, you might get a different answer every time you do it.
Great.
One really cool instance of like, how is this different from like a Google search? Well, if you're looking for an IKEA like Hermes like trundle bed, which I've put together, it's very difficult. But let's say you're shopping for that. Yes, you can find it on the IKEA website and you can see if the store has it, but will it fit in your 2016 Kia Sorento? You can ask ChatGPT that. It will convert the trundle bed like measurements from centimeters to square feet or square inches, and will tell you whether or not your Kia hatchback will fit that bed into your car so you can take it home. That's kind of one of the examples that really resonated with me when I first started learning about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a good example. Jesus, do you have anything to add to how you would define AI? Especially maybe without using a tool as part of your definition, because maybe some people don't know what ChatGPT is.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I've asked myself that question many times, and I think the best way for me to describe it is if you think of algorithms like what Google uses when we're used to searching for data. Those are algorithms that are categorizing information, are matching your input to an existing input that's already there. With generative AI, the program is creating new outputs. So it's using existing data that's been trained on millions and millions of bytes of data to create a completely new and original response to whatever prompt you put in. So it's very different from what we're used to using in our daily lives. So.
Yeah. So if it sounds like for both of you that key component of this that makes this unique and different is that it's outputting something completely original. You're not just getting a Google search result of, millions of pages that might talk about best study abroad programs in Spain. It might come up with a new solution and not just those regurgitating information that's already out there.
Right. And one of the drawbacks of GPT is the models that it's referencing date up to September 2021.
Yeah.
So that's kind of an issue. And I think Google's going to address that when they release Bard, which I believe will have like a real-time search of the internet.
Wow. Okay, cool. We're getting ahead of ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, I've actually got to try Bard, and I have it as a browser too. And it's more powerful in that ability to search online. I still like GPT in terms of their model. I think is more accurate, but yeah, there are many models out there right now.
So that's a great segue into our first little segment here. We wanted to give everyone some use cases, some examples we can kind of dig into as a starting block for our discussion here. And we're going to start with a platform and utilize ChatGPT as our first sort of example. If you guys aren't familiar with ChatGPT, it's a tool that leverages AI sort of technology and frameworks. And there's there's a lot of tools. I shouldn't say a million, but there's a lot of tools. And you probably have already been using a lot of tools that have used AI in the past. Grammarly is a great example. It's been around, for years now, and it uses AI. So ChatGPT is a tool that leverages AI, and Jesus is going to show us an example of how he has used one way he's used ChatGPT in his work at Coursera in institutional relations. So I'll let you take it away, Jesus.
Yeah, thank you. And again, like just to echo what's been said, we by no means are experts, or at least I'm not an expert in the field, but it's a very dynamic field that is changing every day. So what I'm about to share with you, it's some very basic ways that which you can use ChatGPT to improve or enhance what you're already doing. And in a follow-up conversation discussion, we can always look into how we got here. But essentially what I'm showing you here on the screen, you see on the right side, that is ChatGPT's website on openai.com. And the interface, which is also available to you. So you don't need to be an AI expert. You don't need to be any sort of programmer to use it. And on my left here, I'm just going to have some prompts that I've created in advance so that I can use ChatGPT and give you an idea of how others are leveraging AI. So in this particular example, I'm going to use ChatGPT to help me create an itinerary of some visits to international high schools. In this case, I'm specifically going to ask ChatGPT to create a list of high schools that historically have been sending international students to the United States because I'm planning a trip to Malaysia, specifically to Kuala Lumpur, and I want to fast forward or speed up that process of researching which schools I need to visit, where to go, etc. So normally, this is a task that it will take a substantial amount of time to research if you were going to do this using a search engine like Google. So if you've seen how ChatGPT operates, you're very familiar with this. If not, essentially you have a bar at the bottom of the page where you can input a prompt or a question to ChatGPT, and then ChatGPT will answer back. So in this case, I'm going to start by asking it, I should say, to create a list of high schools in Kuala Lumpur that historically have sent students to the United States and see what happens. So I just paste that prompt, click send, and then it can respond in several ways, right? Usually, in a matter of seconds, it's going to give you an answer to some of the information that you've asked it to reply with. In this case, it will make some disclosures about their limitations, but it just spit back 10 high schools that I should consider in my visit to Kuala Lumpur. So normally that will take us a little bit of time. So now I'm going to ask it to group those geographically so I can visit them based on their location, and it may speed things up for me while I'm there. So I'm asking to group them geographically so that I can visit the schools every day. So now I click send, and GPT has now created basically groups based on the schools that I've asked him to look at, the ones that he recommended per area. Okay, so now you can see how this is helping me to very quickly put together that trip to Kuala Lumpur. Now I'm going to ask it to put together an itinerary that includes 2 schools per day, so that I have a little bit more of an itinerary in place. So now it has taken that list of recommendations, broke it down by geography, and now it made an itinerary for me per day. Okay. Now from here, if I want to, for example, ask it, this is something that you might want to add to your itinerary. I want to take some of those high school leaders to dinner somewhere nearby. I can ask it to add that to my itinerary as well. So why don't you recommend me a few restaurants that I could take those leaders to, so I don't have to do the research? And now it has taken those schools and it adds a few restaurant recommendations to my list. So now it basically not only created the itinerary, but also giving me some recommendations of local places that I didn't know about. And then finally, the last 2 prompts, I'm going to ask it to put together the itinerary and bring everything together, but also to plan my outbound from LAX to the airport and my inbound. I'm asking it to also add 2 extra dates for sightseeing and to recommend some places that I can visit when I'm there as well. Okay, so now it added to my itinerary the entire plans for the trip, so that 9-day trip, and it also gave me some recommendations of historical sites that I could visit based on where I'm going to be located at the time that I'm visiting. And finally, since, assuming that this is your first time in Kuala Lumpur, I'm going to ask you to give me a quick overview of the entry requirements of a US citizen and some of the cultural practices that are important to keep in mind when visiting Malaysia. And of course, it gives me a summary of some of the entry requirements, passport-wise, visa, you don't need a visa, COVID restrictions, if there are any, return tickets, etc. And very important, I think this is very useful, it's also giving me some background of the culture and some of the practices that I should keep in mind when I'm visiting that country if it's for the first place. So again, there's a lot of prompts, and we don't have a lot of time to do this showcasing, but this is just a very quick example of how you can leverage AI to help you fast track a research process that would have taken you perhaps a day or two, or maybe longer than that.
Yeah, that's great. So let me ask you, can you take this a step further and, to make this even more valuable to somebody who's planning a recruitment trip like this? Can you then ask ChatGPT to plot on a Google map all of the restaurants and schools for you and show you the pins so you can have a visualization of where everything is?
Yeah, so that's a great question. ChatGPT, it's a little bit limited in terms of the answers that it can give you, because it's a text-based algorithm, right? So the responses will in text form. However, there are ways that you can play around so that it gives you locations so you can then add or export them to a Google Maps, for example.
Yeah.
If we're looking at other algorithms, or other AI programs like BART, for example, they will be able to do that in real time, perhaps with less accuracy as well.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Well, this is interesting. I'd love to hear from the chat and the viewers what you thought of this as we dive into our next example that Eric is going to show. And we'll come back to this, everybody, because we just want to show you a few examples of ways AI can be leveraged. But yeah, let us know if your mind was just blown in the chat or if you've seen this and this is an old hat for you. But I always love seeing these demonstrations because I'm always like, wow, that's really powerful. So Eric, why don't you show us how what the example you're going to show us and give us a little context for it?
Sure. So with Podium's product, we facilitate a lot of our asynchronous learning via an LMS. And within that LMS, we have a chatbot. We call it our Help Hub. It's a 24/7 chatbot that students can use to get some of their questions answered if they get stuck on content, because we know we are teaching tech skills to some students who may not have that background of computer engineering or computer science. So sometimes they get stuck and they need a little help. And this is just a quick demo of what happened before we had AI incorporated into our chatbot and what happens now. So with our first generation bot, we can see here, our bot is open on the left-hand side, and then we've got one of our problem sets on the right. The student is going through the prompting of like, hey, I have a question. You guys, this is familiar. You've seen a chatbot, you've used them. Some of you may hate them. I have a love-hate relationship with chatbots. But so bot says, hey, what's your question about? Student chooses, I've got a question about a milestone or portfolio project. Now, here's where it gets interesting. We know this is gonna be challenging. What are you working on? They choose the item that they're working on. This is a data analytics. So prior to incorporating OpenAI into our product, we had to ask the student to copy and paste the task from the assignment into the bot, because the bot really had a lot of difficulty recognizing natural language, like recognizing, hey, how do I do this? Like it's great, and we have a really high resolution rate, but it couldn't get over that edge. So as you'll see here, the student is going to input. And some students, they may not read that, they may not follow the directions, and they may input the question in some type of language that we didn't ask them in the prompt. So it's thinking, and I can't get this right? The bot says, I don't have an answer for you. Now we go in, we copy the actual question, or we follow the prompt accordingly, and boom, our bot is going to float them a good answer. So they're going to have to use the average formula in Excel to get that answer to work. So it's a hint. We never give away the answer, but we want to get students over that hump. So here we go with the second generation bot powered by OpenAI. This is a student asking a question in our digital marketing track. So, okay, same flow. Notice here though, at the very top, and this is important to us, and it's probably important to a lot of folks who have a chatbot, we want the student to know that they're talking with artificial intelligence. We don't want to try to pretend this is a human. We don't want to fake like it's a human. We don't want to provide misinformation. So I'm really, really happy that our product has this. Yes, you're talking to an AI bot. So we'll continue. Same thing, question about a milestone or portfolio project. Chooses the milestone that they're working on. A milestone is just our name for assignments. Okay, we don't put the prompt here. We say, please ask your question with what you're working on with as much detail as possible. But we don't say, hey, copy and paste anything, because it doesn't need that anymore. It can recognize her natural language, the students. It goes on. The bot works on it, and it actually, so what's really interesting here is this answer is completely unique. Like, we didn't write this. It comes from an article that the bot is referencing, but it is created and generated by this bot based on the question and based on the content that we have. So it will never answer the same question the same way. But what's really important here for us, at least, is the content that our bot references is walled off, right? We don't want the bot to go through the internet and find information there. Many people on this information session may have read a New York Times article about bots that hallucinate or bots that are referencing misinformation. All of the information is housed right in our article center, which is composed of over 600 articles written by humans. What's also kind of cool is the answer that the bot floated takes the tone of our writers. So that empathetic kind of student-centric tone is present throughout all of the bot's answers, and that kind of blew me away. The last demo I'll show is just kind of how it answered an attendance-related question. So this is not a content-related question, like based on any of the course material, but like how do we grade attendance in our courses? And we really struggle with students who choose other. Sorry, I flipped out of that one. Students who choose other and open-ended questions, that's what our bot has traditionally struggled with. So yeah, this is a completely created, generated response based on another article in our article center. We always, at the end of and I think this is best practices, at the end of any chatbot, it either helped or it talked to a person. I know I've been frustrated at times because I'm trying to go through the flow of a bot and I can never talk to a person. It was really important to us to make it, if this doesn't work, if this bot can't answer your question, then we immediately have help for you in the form of one of our Health Hub specialists who is generally an alumni of our program. I could demo one where the bot doesn't know the answer, and this happens, right? This bot doesn't know the answer. I don't need to go through that demo, but just last but not least, the reason why access. So access for our students, we've got students taking the Global Tech Experience across the globe, and they're in different time zones. So they're not always going to have a human who's ready and able to help. So we want access, we want efficiency. About 20% of our students ask 80% of the questions, and we can't we may not be able to get to them all. So having a bot there to facilitate that work is super important for us, and scale, obviously. We can help more students quicker and produce the outcomes that we want our students to have if we can scale using AI. And there's certainly challenges, but that's what I've seen so far with this particular product.
Great. Well, and I think too, one of the things that we know, I can share at least anecdotally, and Eric, you'll know far more, but the response of students unprompted when they talk about the support and their ability to get through the milestones and get through the projects and assignments. And a lot of students reference using the Help Hub and using the bot as an invaluable tool that helped them when they were, working on a problem set at 2 a.m. and they actually got the help they needed, as opposed to, in some settings, that help is never going to come, and they may never get that help if they, are on a student schedule and working in the middle of the night. So, any more to add about the student response to this, Eric?
Well, so we pride ourselves on what we call our resolution rate, and that's the percentage of questions that can get resolved before that we have to speak with a human, because obviously speaking with a human is the most cost inefficient way we can deliver help. And previously with our first gen bot, it was at 55%. And interestingly enough, with our AI bot, it was at 33%. So it's not as good. That being said, I think in the long run, if we can keep training the bot, keep providing good input, good data in, good data out, we'll be able to enhance that resolution rate and eventually get up there to 50, 60%. But I really like the fact that we're not having to prompt our students to copy and paste anymore. I think it's a game changer for our product.
Well, that's a lot of friction. And as we all know in education, students don't read the instructions we give them most of the time. And so that, I'm sure, was a huge friction point in terms of I just asked a question, what's the problem? They probably didn't even read the part where it said copy and paste. That's interesting. I just want to bring up Megan's question from the chat. She said, how on human end do we learn about, quote, student-centric tone of bots control for this? I think she's trying to ask, how did you generate a student-centric tone? How did you make that happen?
Oh, so I think with our writing, we always try to keep it light, congenial. We are providing tech skills, but we also can't make it confusing. So it's all done via one of my great colleagues, Amy Sparent.
Yes.
She has gone in and put in a ton of work into making our articles tone specific. But I do think whatever tone you make, the bot is going to take that tone and it's going to be a part of the responses it creates. So it needs to be what your product wants to represent, I would say.
And you can prompt an AI tool to do that. So for instance, in ChatGPT, if you wanted to write an email about, I don't know, getting your budget increased, and you could tell it, write this email like Ernest Hemingway, or use the tone of some other famous, obviously it has to be a writer that has a lot of prolific content out there that would be recognizable. And then it'll give you something. It may not be great, but it'll give you something that kind of mirrors or mimics the tone of that particular writer. So you can put some guardrails around that tone. I hope that helped, Megan. If I didn't understand your question correctly, please let us know. So let's move on. So one of the examples that both of you gave here really centered on the power of a really great prompt. And I'll start with you, Jesus, and talking about what's your approach to using prompts? How do you make sure that it, encourages creativity and sparks, our own minds to do a little work, as opposed to sort of just taking whatever is regurgitated out? Because I don't know if anybody else has used one of these tools, but I've typed in just a really bad prompt and I've gotten really bad output from it. So can you unpack that a little bit for us, the power of a prompt and how you approach it?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I get asked that a lot, actually. And my approach first off, I think it really helps me to understand how it operates, right? So just knowing how AI and some of these models like ChatGPT operate, it really helps you to tweak your prompts. For example, when I think of ChatGPT, I'm not thinking of a browser or a Google algorithm. I'm thinking this is a database that has over almost 600 gigabytes, 600 million gigabytes of data that has basically knowledge of everything that humans have put out there. And it's there, right? It's going to use that as a source for creating new content. So I keep that in mind. And honestly, if, in a more, I would say kind of like a funny example, if you watch any of these Iron Man movies, like you see Iron Man interacting with his AI, it's essentially what I think when I'm using these tools. It's like you have someone to bounce ideas with, not something to ask for specific answers. And that really helps me to tweak those prompts, because you're absolutely right. A tweak in your prompt, it will give you a completely different answer to what you prompted in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Nikhil mentioned here that in a comment in the chat that it really depends on the sort of the data set you're drawing from. And so in Eric's, it's a closed data set, like we control what it's pulling from, whereas ChatGPT, it's anything that is public, not gated on the internet up to whatever 2021. And so, yeah, I think that is a really important component of how we look at this, is like what it's pulling from. I think, is it Iron Man? His name's Jarvis. Is that what it's
That's
called?
right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yes.
Jarvis. Yeah, we're very futuristic here. Yeah. So I wanted to kind of lean into this because I think Nikhil's question kind of lends itself to the idea of, but how do we make sure that the outputs that we're getting from these prompts, whether they're good or bad prompts, are quality? And one angle I want to approach on this, and Eric, I'll pose this to you, is, how do we make sure that how we're asking the AI tools questions and support, how do we make sure that we're using language that is diverse, it's inclusive, it's representative of a lot of different perspectives and cultures? Like how would we make sure we're thinking in that broader lens, or prompting in that broader lens?
Yeah, I mean, what I find really valuable, at least about GPT 3 and 4, is that you can continuously prompt the answer and modify it according to what you want to see, or if you're not completely happy with it or satisfied, you can say, all right, now let's use a tone that's a little bit more amenable, or can you make this more succinct? So I would say continue to evolve the answer based on prompts. Like perhaps say, hey, take a look at this through a more ethno-relative lens when you actually put when you actually get an output from GPT. You're right, like garbage in, garbage out. And I'm really, really glad that our particular bot only resources information from our article center. If that wasn't the case, I don't think I would have ever enabled it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, Jesus, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that although these companies are setting up some general guardrails around, the answers that we're getting from the models, you always need that human component and double checking what you're getting out. As Eric was saying, garbage in, garbage out, right? And at the same time, we have to keep in mind that although it sounds human, it's not, right? And that's our job to take those outputs and make sure that they will meet the needs of the audience that we're serving, but also, that they're appropriate. And the fine tuning, it's crucial. It's crucial. Yeah. And the only way to get better at it is by using it. So there's no other way of getting better. There's not a magic guide out there that will give you everything you need. There's a lot of helpful information and resources, but ultimately, the only way to get better at it is just to get in and start using them and just do it over and over.
Yeah.
I would just completely agree with Jesus, and also say that like some of the ways in which our answers are tweaked is by a student's thumbs up or talk to a human. If we're seeing that this bot is referencing an article that is just way off and confusing, and they choose to talk to a human, we've got to go in and iterate on that information. So, I know we'll get to the discussion later about jobs and what the impact will have, but I truly believe there always will be a human element, at least in the next 10 years of what we're doing here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think a great example of this, like inclusive thinking around how to leverage AI. I was on a webinar for more of the travel content creator vertical industry. And they were talking about how, this is a great opportunity for people who, write about destinations and create guides and things like that, to then be able to use something like ChatGPT to understand a different perspective. So mobility-based issues, or, different races and ethnicities and sexual orientations traveling to different destinations. If you don't identify with some of those, you may not know some of the things people need to watch out for, or resources and things that might be interesting to those other groups. So you can ask ChatGPT, what are some things someone in a wheelchair would need to know about traveling to Beijing, what have you. And then they can sort of include some of those tips, if you will, without trying to say, hey, I'm an expert, like, hey, here's some things you might want to consider and research further. And so I think it allows us as humans to, in a safe space, ask questions that help us understand maybe a perspective that we don't hold ourselves. So I'm curious if you guys have thought about that, or utilizing it in that way to help us all kind of get a better lens.
Absolutely. I would say, everything that we do today will be enhanced by AI in the next 5-10 years. Everything we do. I talk to my nephews and nieces who are, in their teenage years, and I tell them, perhaps the job that you're going to be doing, it doesn't exist yet.
Yeah.
That's how fast things are moving. And this is not something that is just for a few nerds like us that are using it in a lab setting, right? This is something that's impacting everyone. And something that I wanted to point out before I forget, it's the adoption rate that it has taken globally, right? This application of ChatGPT, as an example, reached 100 million users in 5 days. 100 million users in 5 days. Just think about that for a second. That is more than any other application that's ever been created. More than Instagram, more than Facebook, more than Netflix. So it's telling us how quick this is moving, and we just either have to get on board or be left behind at this point, right? It's going to impact everything we do.
We are close to time, so I want to skip ahead a little bit. Let's talk about some of the concerns, considerations. I know we're not going to get into a lot of this, but and I want to leave time for a Q&A. So if you do have time to stay on with us, we will keep going, and we'll leave about 5-10 minutes for some Q&A. But I did want to talk about privacy. I feel like when you talk about AI, there's a lot of people, I don't know, if you grew up in the 90s like me, you hear something like AI and you're like, oh my God, the Terminator's coming true, right? Like, so for, the people that are a little freaked out by this, they have some concerns around, especially in higher education, FERPA, for instance, privacy concerns. What do you all think are some approaches or things we do need to be cognizant of around these issues of FERPA or privacy, to make sure that when we're leveraging these tools, we're doing it in the the most up and up way possible without violating anybody's privacy? Eric,
Yeah. So as far as FERPA is concerned, I think we both agree, or a lot of people on this panel agree, that it may not have kept up with the evolving tech. But we always want to stay on the safe side. So as far as our bot is concerned, if a student asks a question about a grade they've received, it's walled off from going into OpenAI servers or any of that data. I think you really need to add some safeguards to how that information is communicated to anything you do, and it's all done and pushed back into our LMS. So I do think that law will need to get changed or perhaps, I don't know, re-examined. But it's always good to stay on the safe side of things. And if I were to recommend using AI in a bot or incorporated into your product, I would just make sure that no grading information can make its way onto servers that's not part of your cloud.
Yeah, and just to just to echo what Eric was saying, there are, this is a relatively new, interface that we've seen with AI. So I don't think anyone is ready for or was ready for what happened. Like you've seen multiple examples of how, politicians are trying to come together recently. As recent as yesterday, we saw some of that in the news, where they're trying to come together to regulate or to try to understand how they can regulate. So I don't think there's like Eric said, I think that things might need to be re-examined at this point. We don't really have an answer how to take care of that or address that challenge, but it's definitely something that we should keep in mind. But whenever you're putting information out there, it's going somewhere. It's staying in someone's server. It's someone will have access to that information. So we have to keep that in mind as well.
Yeah. Well, and I think it kind of, this is unrelated technically to AI, but I think if you watched any of the testimony of the CEO of TikTok, I think last month when he testified in front of a Senate committee, I think, or something like that. But the questions that the lawmakers were asking, for most of us who are any level of like, we know how our routers work at our houses, for instance, we just thought that a lot of the questions they asked were like, that, dude, that's not what's happening here. And so I think that's one of the challenges, is that the disconnect between really understanding the technology, even at a baseline level, without being a nerdy techie, and what the fear that people think is happening with the technology. There is a pretty big gap there sometimes. Related to that, I have two other kind of concerns areas that I want to jump into, and then we'll turn it over to Q&A, everybody. So please add your questions to the chat or the Q&A. I think there's a Q&A button on your screen somewhere. Please add them there. But let's talk, because this is higher education and just generally, let's talk about academic integrity. So, I think that a lot of people would think, oh, well, why wouldn't I just go into ChatGPT and say, hey, write a 5-page paper about the fall of the Soviet Union and then write that for me. Yeah. So how can AI be leveraged to address this growing concern, or is it just going to exacerbate the problem even further? Because it was already a problem. It was already a concern for people to think about. You could copy words from a book. It's not an AI problem or a technology problem, but yeah, I'd love your thoughts. Jesus, I'll let you take this one.
Yeah, no, academic integrity has always been a challenge, right? And working in the education industry as well, there's always ways for people to get creative, and AI is not making that easier. However, at the same time, we have to stay in touch with reality, right? I'll give you an example of a few faculty members that I was working with not too long ago. They served their students, and they expected that 20% of their students have some sort of contact or use with ChatGPT. In reality, the survey showed that it was over 80% of them, right? So I see, as I'm working with educators, I see both. I see people that are burying their heads under the ground and saying, this is not going to happen, this is not going to change. And others that are embracing these technologies and making them part of their teaching. I think what we will see in the future is the same way that we did with the browser, we do need to put some guardrails around it. But how can we use this knowing that it's going to be part of our society, knowing that it's going to help us to further, the mission of higher education? There's some challenges, but at the same time, there are also some solutions that come with the same technology, right? So you have AI detectors that will identify whether if someone is using AI to generate responses, which they're not a silver bullet, but they will help to some degree to help with academic integrity as well. So I think it's a mixed bag right now, if you ask me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Eric, I love your thoughts. I mean, as the resident PhD here.
Well,
could you have written your dissertation with AI?
I think I might be tempted to have it help me because it was certainly a struggle. But I'm gonna plead the fifth on that one. As far as like in-person, on-campus universities are concerned, I suspect there's going to be a lot of blue books and writing in-person exams. But we're lucky enough to have our product mainly focused on like project-based coding and tasks. Not that GPT can't code, but what we hope to do with our product is really start to encourage students to use it and to how to write particular prompts. Because if you're let's say in our coding for data track and you're using Python and SQL, you've got to have a basic understanding of those languages before you can even prompt GPT in the right way. So what I'm kind of excited about is I think it's going to make beginner to intermediate coders even better. It's going to be a tool that can enhance their capabilities. As far as plagiarism is concerned, I think that's going to continue. It's a difficult thing to track and difficult to take care of. But with our curriculum, I'm hoping that it won't really be a big issue, but we will see.
Yeah, definitely. I
Yeah,
think
and Brooke, there's a question in the chat I'm seeing for Tony there as well. So
yeah, I was going to get to that. Yeah, so
Great.
we kind of addressed this at the beginning. You kind of gave a great example of how you would plan maybe a recruitment tour if you're going to a specific destination. So we talked about that at the beginning, Tony, so you can watch the replay to get a little bit of that. But I'm curious if either of you have, and anybody watching, if you work in international missions and recruitment, if you have been using AI in a specific way to help you with your recruitment efforts, please let us know. We'd love to learn from you. But Jesus, do you have any other use cases?
Yeah, I mean, I could quickly share on how this will be very useful for, I'm thinking specifically around recruitment or a recruiter or marketing department. It could very quickly, or it can accelerate your progress towards creating customized campaigns, for example, for a specific region of the world, and for an audience that you're trying to recruit, right? One of the interesting things about models like ChatGPT is that it's multilingual, right? So that means that you can create something in English and ask it to generate it in whatever language you like. There's a lot of languages that are supported, and it will create a very accurate messaging that resonates with the tone that you're trying to describe. In fact, you can also ask the model to tweak it to the profile of a 23-year-old persona from this country. So you can use it to tweak your marketing content and your recruitment content in a way that it will generally take, I've seen this thing do, the work of what that used to be taken by an entire team in a month in minutes, right? That's how powerful it is when it comes to content generation and tweaking. So
one of my favorite prompts is when I ask it to explain something to me, I ask it to do it as if they were speaking to a moderately intelligent high schooler. And I find that the information it gives is completely digestible for me at that point.
Yep.
That's great. That's really great. So Marissa, hello, Marissa, how are you? She said that she recently used ChatGPT to write a short work article about an event, as well as the first draft of a grant proposal. Yeah, I think that, for anyone in any profession, but a lot of looking at a blank page is really intimidating, and it's like tough to get started. Like, where do I begin? We all have a lot of great knowledge and expertise in our heads, but getting that out of that web of knowledge onto something that's salient and understandable is quite challenging. So I think using these tools as your jumping off point, I think that is the real value add here. Where it gets tricky is when it becomes like, I'm just going to use whatever it spit out to me as the truth or my final version. And you lose that humanity, the soul of it. Sometimes if you don't add back in your special sauce and special flavor, that only, Eric could add, that only Jesus could add, that only Tony could add, that only Marissa could add. And so I think that is one of the big lessons with this, is that even though you're using AI, you still have to add yourself back into it, whatever that output is at the end. I just want to open up the chat, the questions to the audience. We do have a question here. Thank you so much for participating, everyone. So how can faculty use AI for their work? And will AI replace or enhance their usefulness? Any thoughts in acknowledging it's still early days? Thanks, Nikhil.
Great.
I would, if I were still faculty and teaching, I would certainly ask it to help me write syllabi. I would put in text, I would put in learning objectives, and I would see how it would output. I mean, syllabi for me, back in the day when I used to be a teacher, was one of the most time-consuming parts of my academic career.
Yeah, I've seen everything from faculty that have literally tested how it would grade an assignment and got similar results to what they've already, they grade one assignment and then they give that rubric to ChatGPT and ask it to continue doing that and getting similar or if not identical results. So on the grading part, definitely syllabus writing, and there are many other applications that could definitely simplify your job as a faculty member. But to your point of Nikki's question regarding whether if this will be replacing in a way, right, or perhaps enhancing or replacing faculty, I personally, and I've discussed it many times, I don't think AI will replace faculty anytime soon. But faculty that use AI will replace faculty. I think that's the difference, right? Because it's a tool that it's enhancing everything you do. So the actual software and tool is not going to replace anyone, but those that become savvy in it, they will be able to enhance their abilities and the amount of work that they can do and their skills. And obviously, they'll become more competitive than those that do not.
Mm-hmm. Like 100%. And I think that's true for any field. I think in the future, insert any title and somebody who says, oh, I can do that job and I'm pretty savvy with AI is going to beat out another candidate that says, I can do that job, period. And they don't know how to use AI. So I think this is kind of like the new frontier, just like the skills we teach in our global tech experience at Podium. Our mantra is that these are the next generation's technical skill sets that every employee in any industry are going to need to know how to use. Like Microsoft Office, when I was leaving college, it was like, that was the tech that you needed to know. You need to be proficient in Microsoft Office. Well, now that's a given. Now it's like, well, of course, duh. And the next level is these other tools. And I think AI is that next generation of skill set that we all just need to be proficient in at the very least. I just wanted to leave on a very positive note. So thank you to both of our guests, Eric and Jesus. You've brought all the knowledge, all the nerdiest. I love it. Thank you so much for being here, both of you, and taking the time to talk about AI. Jesus, I'll start with you. What is one thing that you are most excited about the possibilities of AI that maybe hasn't even happened yet or hasn't come to fruition?
No, that's a great question. And from the top of my head, I just think of the accessibility of the resources that AI is putting in front of people that otherwise wouldn't have that opportunity. And yes, given that it could be looked at both ways, it could be bad and good, but I see more opportunity for people to get out of some of their socioeconomic situations or the lack of knowledge and resources in some areas, like some of the members in the panel already shared in chat. I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to do a lot of good and to impact a lot of people using these tools globally.
Mm-hmm. Eric, what are you most looking forward to?
That was a great answer, Jesus. I completely agree. I'm most looking forward to being able to kind of perhaps artificially enhance my skill set. I'm not a great artist, but if I prompt DALL-E to create something for me that's unique, and I can do that. I consider myself a good writer, but it can certainly enhance my skill or create or generate an idea that I might not have been thinking of to enhance my writing. So I feel like it's just this little tool in the toolbox or big tool in the toolbox that can make a difference in one skill set. And I'm super stoked that a lot of our students are going to start to incorporate it into their learning and their skill sets.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I'm going to add here too. I think it's exciting because I think as much as it seems counterintuitive, I think that AI is only going to enhance the need for like critical thinking and discernment skills because everybody can now pump out a ton of information and content and use these tools. Now the skill set of being able to differentiate between, wow, that sounds like a robot, AI output that is just full of, fluff or BS, versus this seems like a real meaty, knowledgeable, contextual piece of information. I think the ability as humans to discern between the two, I think, will become even more important.
I agree. And I think that's going to be one of the key, roles of higher education moving forward. We are entering the age of AI, which in parallel is also entering an age of this misinformation. And higher education institutions are going to be crucial in helping, to keep that information, the right information, and to make sure to vet that information to what's real and what isn't.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think Marissa asked a great question of people's thoughts on how do we address this with students? How do we talk to students about leveraging AI in whatever that they're doing, their academic work, et cetera? And I think, for me, it just popped in my head, the example I would give is sort of like when we're doing pre-departure orientation for students, and we have to have the, alcohol talk, for instance. And we talk about, how do you, participate without, being destructive for yourself, and being considerate to the local culture, but also mindful of your own, capacity for those things. And so I think it can be used as a force of good and a great experience, or it can be leveraged in a really negative way as well. And I think, as educators, that's our role to help students walk that line and figure out, so they can start discerning and critically thinking about it. I'm curious, Eric, if you have thoughts on that, especially someone who's worked, very directly with students as an educator.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that was a major theme in Sam Altman's testimony yesterday in front of Congress. Just how do we keep misinformation at bay? I think as an educator, wow, it's too early for me to really begin to understand like how we can do that. I think it is going to involve some type of regulatory mechanism, whether it's a new body, whether it's existing framework within governments. Gosh, I know I'm kind of skirting your question, Brooke, but I don't have an answer, but it's super, super interesting.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. Yeah. That's great. Well, thank you both so much again for being here. Thank you to Podium for sponsoring this episode. And thank you to everyone who's joined us live here as part of this conversation. We will have the replay up on the Gateway International Group website very soon, so you can come back and dissect it and ask more questions. And if you really like this topic, we'd be happy to dive deeper into this conversation on specific areas of how AI is being leveraged. So let us know over at Gateway if you're interested. Again, my name is Brooke Roberts. Thank you to Eric and Jesus for joining us. And I hope you all have a wonderful day. And just a reminder to everybody, or an announcement. This is our last live episode of the Spotlight. We're going to take a little summer holiday, and we'll be back with more fresh episodes in August. In the meantime, we will be rolling out, promoting our replays and our archives of all the content you may have missed over the last few months. So stay tuned for that. Make sure you're on our newsletter if you want to get those announcements. So thank you everyone for being here, and see you soon, everybody. Bye.